Who are the players with the most on the line that you're looking forward to watching tomorrow night, if you could pick out a couple for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say most on the line. I would definitely look at wrapping up that receiver position. I think it's going to be an interesting battle with guys like Jalen Brooks, Simi Fehoko, and even coming on here in the last week and a half, Jalen Cropper, the undrafted free agent out of Fresno State. Those are a lot of guys, as well as Dennis Houston, that are trying to vie for that last roster spot at receiver, in my opinion. I think that's going to continue to be an intriguing battle. I would have told you the last tight end spot before John Stevens went down with an ACL last week, although I feel all four of those spots are pretty much locked up now. And then you can pretty much name your depth offensive linemen, and I would say that those guys are all fighting for a spot. Whether it's going 6 through 9 or 6 through 10 on the final 53, I think all of those guys are vying for those spots right now.
How would you compare Awesome Richards, coming in as a rookie, to other starting offensive linemen? Where is that gap? How far is he away from being a guy you could really trust out there if he was pressed into regular season action?
Yeah, I think that gap is still pretty wide, although I do feel more confident in Awesome Richards to eventually get a higher ceiling than the rest of those depth guys. But I'm so worried about cheating his process and throwing him out there too early. We've seen in the past, and especially with offensive linemen, where they get out a little bit too early in their careers, and that confidence is shot for a really long time, and it's tough to get that back. So I would really like to see Awesome develop over the course of the next 10 to 12 weeks. And if it comes to a situation where we really need him to touch the field, then I would hope that doesn't happen until at least week 12 or week 13.
Nick, how do you feel like they play it if Tyron Smith gets banged up at any point? Do you envision them moving out Tyler Smith to left tackle, or how do you think they play that?
I think so, just because with how well that went last year, and then they would try to figure out what to do there at left guard. They have a couple of different options that they'd be able to slot in at left guard, and none of them too reliable, in my opinion, at this very point. But you got guys like Brock Hoffman. I feel like he really struggled last week after doing pretty well in week 1 at center. And then Awesome Richards, obviously he's been worked quite a bit at left guard during training camp, has some limited experience there. And then guys like Josh Ball have gotten some reps as well. So it would be quite interesting to see who they would slot in. But in my opinion, I would rather go see them go get somebody whenever that problem would occur. I would like to see them either go trade for a guy or look in the free agency market and try to grab from there. But I think next Tuesday will be a really big a turning point as far as that offensive line group and what it'll look like on the roster. With 1,200 players hitting the waivers, I would be shocked if they didn't go out and try to find some offensive line depth or some linebacker depth.
Wonder what your thoughts are of Mazi Smith. We were talking about Mazi earlier, and maybe he hasn't hit the ground running as we had hoped. Seems like the adjustment period's taken a little bit longer for him. What have you heard about Mazi inside the building there, and your thoughts about him through the first 2 preseason games and through training camp?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't get me wrong. I feel like I would have liked to seen more from Mazi Smith during this preseason action here early on, especially going against some second team and third team units. But also I try to remind myself that, I think there's a lot of comparison that we're making subconsciously when talking about Mazi Smith, just based on the first round picks that we've seen immediately contribute for the Cowboys in the last few years. We had Tyler Smith, who did a fantastic job last year and really helped out the team when adversity struck. The year before, Micah Parsons, I think that speaks for itself. You have CeeDee Lamb the year before that. So it's kind of tough to come in after that run of first round picks and, fans maybe expect him to make that sort of impact right away. But, I think it's going to take time with him. I think that's another process. He's still really extremely strong. And I still want to see him lined up on the defensive line with the starting defensive line, because I think it's easier to double him when you have second and third team guys around him. So, in the regular season, I think he's going to get his opportunities early. I think he's going to get, brought back to earth a couple of times early, but I'm really curious to see how he responds to that. And I think, with the mentorship of Jonathan Hankins and what he's done with Aiden Dirty as well, I think he's eventually going to get to the point by the end of the year where he is that reliable run stopper in the middle that'll be able to plug those gaps. And if it's not him getting the tackle at the end of the play, it's someone right behind him. And that's what they wanted to bring him in for this year. Anything else further than that, let's get to that when that comes around.
Nick, I'm kind of looking at the 3 technique or the under tackle, and I feel like that Chauncey Golston is probably the backup to Osa. Are they going to protect the draft, you think, and keep Junior Fehoko and probably ship off Neville Gallimore if you were looking at how that one might play out?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and this is kind of something I was thinking about just yesterday. You're giving me kind of deja vu, Brian. But for me, I think you have to keep Junior Fehoko around just because that's still a relatively high draft pick in the 4th round. You want to see where that development eventually takes him. He has battled some injury during camp, missed the first preseason game with a shoulder issue. He's back fully healthy, but trying to ramp him back up to speed and get him up to NFL speed as a rookie, I don't think that they're going to, give up on him too early. Jerry Jones said it this past week, or Mike McCarthy may have said it as well, I believe. It's giving up on guys too early. They don't want to be able to do that next week. That's a big emphasis going into this 53 cut. So I wouldn't expect to see any draft pick given up on fairly too early. But I really like what Neville Gallimore has done in that room during training camp. I think it's between him and Chauncey Golston as far as, who would they want to keep on the team and who would they maybe either A, want to ship out or B, put on waivers. But I think that's going to be probably one of the more interesting conversations coming out of Tuesday. For me personally, I would keep Gallimore just based on the camp he's had and the step forward he's taken.
Okay, it's Nick Harris, DallasCowboys.com here with you. How good of an opportunity for evaluation did we get against these Raiders? Are they going to have good players in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Aiden O'Connell has been one of the more surprises at quarterback during the preseason so far. He's done a really good job leading that Raiders offense. There's some really strong rookies that they brought in. Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame, and then Tyree Wilson, outside linebacker from Texas Tech. He hasn't gotten an opportunity to play during the preseason. Probably won't see him either on Saturday night. But I really like what Michael Mayer has done in his limited opportunities getting onto the field. And then in their second level, man, they have done a really good job keeping running lanes flustered. Amari Burney is a linebacker rookie out of Florida. Done a really good job in coverage, and he's come down and made some big-time plays in the backfield as well in the first couple of games. They've only allowed 24 points to the Niners and the Rams, and I know it's preseason, but that still says a lot going up against those offensive coordinators that they are going up against. So I think the defense is really the strength of this team going into Saturday night. I think Will Grier is going to get some big challenges, and that offensive line is going to get a lot of big challenges as well.
Hey, well, Nick, speaking of that, has Will Grier done enough to keep his spot as the third quarterback, or is that somewhere they might go light?
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. For me, I would probably try to find a way to keep Grier on the roster, but it's going to be tough. There's a couple of positions that you definitely want to have more depth at. We talked about offensive line. Stephen Jones said this week he was talking about 6 through 9 or 6 through 10, talking about the offensive line. So that makes me think that they're having conversations about keeping 9 or 10 guys there. It'll be interesting to see what they do with safety. They've talked about bringing maybe 1 or 2 extra safeties to help alleviate that linebacker depth that's all of a sudden gotten pretty thin. Maybe bringing guys like Marquise Bell, Wanye Thomas around as well. So talking about quarterback, if you really like what you've seen from Cooper Rush, he can be that model of consistency, then yeah, maybe you let Will Grier walk. But he still has that one opportunity on Saturday night to prove that he's still worthy to stay around in this organization. And Mike McCarthy has done nothing but praise what he's done so far in the preseason as well. So I guess we can only regurgitate what we've been told.
How's Eric Scott been looking lately? He had such a great start to camp, and then it seemed like he kind of came back down to earth a little bit. Where's he stacking up right now in the battle for some of the lower cornerback spots?
Yeah, I was doing a projected 53 cut yesterday, just kind of marking it down and trying to figure out maybe who makes the team, who doesn't. I find it tough to believe that Eric Scott finds a spot on the 53, but that's not to say that he hasn't done well during camp. I think it's just we need to see that translate more to the game environment more consistently. He started off really strong against Seattle last week, had a couple of pass breakups on Tyler Lockett. But then as the game went on, he got cooked a couple of times. Jackson Smith and Jigba definitely got him once on his signature inside release. And even though Eric Scott was able to catch up to him by the end of the play, it was tough to make that play on him. It's another process with him. That's another rookie that, they're really high on. They really like what they've seen through camp, but they don't want to throw him into a situation where it'll kill his confidence early on.
Nick, the running back situation, when you did your 53, were you at 3 or were you at 4?
I was at 3. I feel really good about where Rico Dowdle is as far as an RB2, and I like Deuce Vaughn to definitely make this 53 just because of the playmaking ability that he does have, either as a running back or in gadget situations or lining up in the slot, et cetera. Malik Davis, it's been tough for him. I feel like in this preseason specifically, in the first game he had a couple of opportunities, but it was kind of squandered by the offensive line up front. He wasn't really able to find holes. And then I feel like it was a very similar opportunity for Rico Dowdle last week, and Dowdle made more out of that opportunity. He initiates contact, he falls forward, he gets that extra yardage, and he's really good in pass protection. So, I feel like we're starting to trend towards Dowdle and Vaughn making this roster, and then maybe them trying to keep Davis on the practice squad, but I see him having to survive waivers first.
Nick Harris, Cowboys.com with us here in the GBag Nation. What about our guy Isaiah Land? Has he shown enough as a pass rusher to make this 53, or do they try to sneak him in on the practice squad?
Man, I love that question, Eric. It's definitely one of the bigger questions I had doing that little mock 53 cut yesterday, just because he has come on so strong during the preseason, and he's starting to really stack confidence. He had a really good week of practice this week. He's doing all of the right things at the exact right time. And I think if he can stack one more good performance against the Raiders, he might be number 53. And if he's not number 53, he'll be number 1 on the practice squad if he can survive it. I think with a guy like him, he has the versatility to come in as a pass rusher, fly downhill off the edge. But I also think there's some ability there in the second level for him to maybe drop back into coverage as well. Just with his profile, he's super athletic. I wouldn't want to do that in the NFL regular season, but I think there is potential for doing that later down the line.
Nick, what do you make of this division? Have the Eagles gained ground, lost ground, and New York and Washington as well? How much are they a threat to be a playoff contender?
Yeah, absolutely. I think easily there's 3 playoff teams in this division. You got Philadelphia, Dallas, and New York. As far as taking steps forward, I feel like all of the top 3 have done that. Philadelphia with the way they drafted this year, also bringing in a couple of big-time free agents recently, Rashad Penny to add to that really deep running back room that they all of a sudden have. Dallas, obviously, with additions with Stephon Gilmore, Brandon Cooks, what they've been able to do in the draft as well. And then looking at New York, what they've been able to do in the draft, I feel like Jalen Hyatt's going to be a big-time contributor for them this year. And they paid Daniel Jones, got him happy. So I feel like those 3 teams each took a step forward. I think either 3 have a really good opportunity in this division, but I feel like the winner comes down to Philly and Dallas at the end of the day for sure.